All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Dr. Karen here, and I am going to talk about language therapy goals. Okay, I think my video is officially live, so we're going to get started. So, again, for those of you who are new here, I am Dr. Karen Dudek-Brannan, and I am here to help you to create better systems for your language therapy so you can make a bigger impact on your students without burning yourself out. So today I wanted to just pop in and do a really quick Q&A about a topic that comes up a lot, which is how to write good goals for language therapy. Now, on these Q&As, I'm going to keep them short and sweet, keep them to one question. I know that I could talk for hours about language therapy goals, but I wanted to just dive into one specific one. If you do have some more questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments below because I can always save that for a later Q&A down the line. I will be popping in and doing these little Q&A sessions frequently in this group and on my page. So the question that I wanted to talk about today, or really the topic that I wanted to talk about, was why I often don't write goals for things like morphology and orthography, even though these are things that I talk about all the time and things that I recommend working on in language therapy, actually in my signature program, Language Therapy Advanced Foundations. These are the two components that I recommend emphasizing in order to build your students' vocabulary and build a foundation so that students have a solid sense of language processing so they can respond to high-level comprehension. So those skills that I mentioned today, things like morphology, understanding word parts, orthography, understanding the meaning behind why words are spelled the way that they are, those things that really go together and build our students' vocabulary, super important for language therapy. So naturally, when I present my language therapy framework for SLPs, I mention these two topics, and a lot of people, think it makes a lot of sense, but people want to know, okay, if I'm going to start working on things like morphology or just the essential 5 framework that I recommend in general, which includes morphology, people want to know, if I'm going to start working on these skills, how do I write goals for them in therapy? And do I need to write goals for these types of things when I'm working on them in therapy? So the first thing I wanted to say to answer that question is, let's say that you're working on things like comprehension, processing, like maybe you have a goal on your student's IEP that's for retelling stories or following directions or answering WH questions. So, some of those things could be functional goals that could be relevant to your students that you could want them to be able to do successfully in order to do well in an academic environment. Well, those things tend to be symptoms rather than causes. So a lot of times when you work on them directly, students don't make great progress because it's something else that's causing them to struggle in the first place. Many times it's things like vocabulary and not really understanding a sense of sentence structure, which morphology can actually improve that. Morphology is something that can improve your vocabulary skills. Improving your vocabulary skills can help your comprehension and can be one of those foundational language skills that improves language processing. So that can have an impact on some of those higher level comprehension type of things. So if you are already working on some of those things and you're going to change your approach, and because you've learned a new strategy, for example, that has to do with studying word parts that's aimed to improve your students' vocabulary, then you don't necessarily have to just totally rewrite the language therapy goals if you're going to change your approach in therapy. If you learn something new that you know will help your students' processing skills, you don't necessarily have to rewrite the goals because the end goal might still be the same. It's just the strategy that you're using to meet the end goal has changed. So for example, if better processing and comprehension is the end goal, and you might have some goals for being able to retell things that you've read or answer questions about it, well, you might start working on some things that are going to build your students' vocabulary that are going to have an impact on that skill. And you don't necessarily have to change the end goal, but you might just be changing your approach in therapy. Think about the end goal as the destination, and then all the things that you're doing in therapy are the vehicle. So You might have a vehicle right now that's working on WH questions and drilling following directions, and maybe it's not working. Well, you're going to try a new vehicle and maybe start to work on things like vocabulary and morphology, and you're just changing the vehicle. You're still going the same place to the end destination. So that's why you don't have to, if you're going to start working on some of these things that I'm recommending, like, studying word parts and studying spellings of words, you don't have to totally revamp your IEPs before you start working on these things. You can just do them right away. Now, with morphology specifically, because a lot of times I will tell people, you know what, just start. If you know something that's going to improve your students' language processing, just start working on it. You can change your approach. And then when IEPs come due, you can tweak the goals a little bit so that it makes it a little bit more specific and relevant to some of the things that you're working on related to the new approach. So it's a little more transparent and obvious what you're working on in therapy. So that's what I recommend. Some of the skills that, like, if you are working on high level comprehension and you want to switch to be working on more foundational skills in the interest of improving high level comprehension, when you revise that IEP, you might make the goals a little bit more specific to that, just to make it a little more clear what you're working on. But when you do that, when it comes to morphology specifically, I don't always write goals for morphology. I might not even use that word specifically. There might not be a goal that says student will improve morphological knowledge. Because, again, the whole point of working on morphology is to improve vocabulary. So if you have some other goals that have to do with vocabulary and word knowledge, working on morphology is going to improve that. So you don't necessarily have to write a goal for it if it is just designed to help your students meet another goal that you might be working on. Just because the task that you're doing in order to reach the goal isn't explicitly stated in the goal, like that's fine. There might be a lot of exercises that you do in therapy that don't look exactly like the behavior that you're meeting in the goal. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing for people, because a lot of times people think, oh, I'm working on this skill, well, I need to write a goal. Well, you don't necessarily have to if what you're doing is aligned with that goal in the first place. So I invite you to reshift your thinking about that. Ask yourself, okay, do I really need to write a goal for this? Or am I already measuring this in some way with the goals that I already have? Because again, maybe you're just changing the vehicle, not the destination. So with morphology specifically, that is often the case. I might have some goals for improving sentence structure. I might have a high-level processing goal for comprehension. I might have a goal for defining and describing words. And again, I'm working on studying spellings and word parts in conjunction to help meet those goals. I might not have it directly stated. How it sometimes might work is that a teacher, if the student is also getting services from a special ed teacher, they might have a goal for spelling. And again, working on morphology and orthography is going to help work towards that goal as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can be working on a goal that is impacted by morphology without actually writing the goal itself. With all that being said, is it okay if you think that this is an area that your student really needs to work on? Is it okay to write a goal for morphology that might directly state it? Sure. I've had SLPs that I've mentored write a goal for being able to infer meanings of words using prefixes and suffixes, for example, or being able to break words apart into prefixes and suffixes. That could be an appropriate goal for morphology. So when I say I don't commonly write goals for morphology and orthography, I don't mean that I never ever do it and that you should never ever do that in your practice. I'm just saying that you want to take the pressure off yourself. You don't necessarily have to write a goal for every single exercise you're doing in therapy. You just want your goals to be representative of the overall end goal. So yes, it might be appropriate some of the time, But if you want to start working on some of these things in therapy, you can just start right away if you know that it's going to improve your students' processing and ability to function in their classroom, especially if they're working on things like reading and spelling and decoding and writing, and if they have some issues with grammar and putting sentences together, then it can have an impact on those goals as well. And you can just work it into what you're already doing in therapy without actually changing your goals. But like I said, this isn't an absolutist type of thing. When I give this type of recommendation, I always encourage you to think about your individual situation and ask yourself the right questions. Am I representing what the end goal is for my student? What do I really want my student to do? And with this thing that I'm considering writing a goal for, is this the vehicle? Do I need a goal to explicitly state what I'm doing here? Or is this already working towards the goals that I already have? Because you don't want to just make more work for yourself and give yourself something else to track if you're just adding a new technique that's going to help your student get to wherever it is you've already been going. So keep that in mind. That is my recommendation for goals when it comes to morphology and orthography, and how I think about language therapy goals in general. Don't overcomplicate it for yourself. Make sure that your goals are easy to track and manageable and focused on the big picture. So, as I've mentioned before, I do have a framework that I teach SLPs, and morphology and orthography are parts of that framework. The point of the framework is to give SLPs a consistent system for language therapy that helps them do a couple things. Number one, it helps you focus on the key root causes behind language processing issues that cause students to struggle in school. And if you have a student who has been working on comprehension and not making progress, then chances are they need this kind of work that I would recommend, because it really gets to the root cause of a lot of those processing problems that tend to not respond to some of the strategies that are being done in the classroom, because again, the students might not have those foundational language skills. So that's the first thing, gets the root cause of processing issues with an evidence-based framework that I have used in my own clinical practice, that is aligned with research that I've done during my doctoral work and that I'm teaching other SLPs. This framework also will help you be efficient and effective in a way that helps you to focus the precious therapy time you have on skills that make the biggest impact on your students, so that you can make the most of that time. And then most importantly, it gives you a structured process so that you can be effective without spending hours planning and prepping. It's something that will allow you to have a really simple process with a set of simple materials. You don't have to have a ton of stuff in order to implement it. You can just repeat the process over and over again once you learn it. It can shave hours off the time you spend prepping and planning, but at the same time actually increase the effectiveness of your therapy. So I actually have just revamped my free online presentation for SLPs, where I walk through this framework. I do talk about goal writing in this framework in a little bit more depth than I did today, as well as things like evaluations, because people have a lot of questions about that, as well as goals. So I walk through the whole framework in the presentation. If you are interested in learning this presentation, just send me or leave a comment below this video and just say 5 components, and I will connect with you on Facebook and send you the details for that presentation. So thanks again, everybody, for checking this out. Let me know if you have any other additional questions about language therapy goals that I can address in a later Facebook Live, and leave me a comment below. And again, say 5 components if you want me to send you the details for that training. Thanks so much.